I first met Rabbi Greenblatt approximately in the year 1990. We were living in Teaneck, New Jersey, and someone pointed out to me Jewish Action. There's something new about Jewish Action. There's a new editor, and something very good, very positive is happening over the Jewish Action. That was the first I heard of Rabbi Greenblatt. He and I shared a love of Rav Kook. I had a vision that I wanted to bring Rav Kook to America. That was my dream, my vision, to bring awareness of Rav Kook's teachings to the American Jewish community. And to do that, I would translate his writings into English, which I did. One of the first publications, I'm going to hold it up, is called Lights of Prophecy, Orot HaNevuah, which was brought out by the Orthodox Union, because Jewish Action was the organ of the OU, of the Orthodox Union. And what I did in this work was I gathered together various writings of Rav Kook pertaining to the topic of Nevuah, of prophecy, and translated them into English. It's bilingual. And it has two haskamot, if we could use that word. One is Rabbi Pinchas Stolper. Then there's a foreword by Rabbi Greenblatt, literary editor of Jewish Action. The Yerushalmi Shkalim says, Ein osim nefashot l'tzadikim, divreihem hem zichronam, which means that the best epitaph for a tzaddik is the tzaddik's own words. So here are the words of Rabbi Matis Greenblatt back in, 1990. Forward. Is it possible that our hedonistic era may witness a revival of the spiritual and even the prophetic aspect of Judaism? Was the loss of prophecy at the beginning of the Second Commonwealth total, or did lesser levels of divine inspiration and experience continue to thrive after full-blown prophecy had ceased? Does the emphasis, or perhaps overemphasis, on the intellectual side of Judaism in some circles convey a one-sided and incomplete picture of the full dimensions of post-prophetic Jewish history? These are some of the themes that concerned Rabbi Bezalel Naor when he compiled this provocative collection of short pieces from a wide range of traditional sources. Recent years have seen a greater focus on externals. This represents, at least in part, a defense reaction to the inroads of the dominant culture. However, it may also mask or compensate for a lack of inner depth and spirituality. One of the effects of this situation is the existence of a disturbingly large number of young people from religious homes who are not turned on to Yiddishkeit. Simultaneous with the above-mentioned hedonism and superficiality, one detects a contemporary yearning for greater spirituality. Rabbi Naor's intriguing and inspiring collection is a symptom of that yearning. May it also serve as a catalyst for a reawakening and a renewal of the Jewish spirit. Matis Greenblatt, literary editor, Jewish Action. So that was really the beginning of a wonderful relationship, and I started an organization, Orot, and Rabbi Greenblatt was one of the individuals who was very supportive of our efforts. So that's how we met. As is well known, Rabbi Greenblatt's Rebbe Muvhak was Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak. Rabbi Greenblatt, as the other Talmidim of Rav Hutner, always referred to him as the Rosh Yeshiva. And somewhere in Pachad Yitzchak, there's a passage where Rav Hudner says that the ideal relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud is when they both have the same tchunot hanefesh. They have the same character traits, and that makes for a wonderful, I'd call it symbiosis of Rebbe and Talmud. That's a wonderful Rebbe-Talmud relationship. When you go into the biography of Rabbi Greenblatt and into the biography of his Rebbe, Rabbi Hudner, you discover something very interesting. Rabbi Hudner was known as his youth as Rebitche Warshava. He came from Warsaw. And I would call it a mixed marriage. His father's people, the Hudners, they were what we'll call Litvakis, Misnagdim. But the mother's people were Ger Hasidim. And that's why in the last years, Rav Hudner wore a spodek, as do the Gerers. I saw Rav Hudner once in my life, and he was wearing this tall fur hat. And I had been told that the Ger Rebbe told Rav Hudner when he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael that he has to start wearing a spodek. So he obeyed the Ger Rebbe. Rabbi Greenblatt's people were also Polish Jews. His father I knew, Moshe Yoel, and he told me that he had accompanied his father to Gur, that they were Ger Hasidim. That was Rabbi Greenblatt's father. And his mother's people were Radziner Hasidim. And they're both buried here in Monsey. To prepare for this interview, I went to the Beis HaChaim, and I came out with photos of both matzevas, which I would make available to the family. And Matis, this I learned from reading his mother's matzeva, her name was Bela. Matis was named after his great-grandfather, Matis Yahu. And on the mother's matzeva, I'm just going to refer to it. It says, Bela bas Rabbi Yaakov Yeshua Greenblatt, and below it says, L'mazkeret Netzach, Laviha Rabbi Yaakov Yeshua Reb Matisyahu, Shaya mechasidei Radzin. So Matis's maternal grandfather was a Radziner Chassid. Uleima Esther bas Reb David Zal Shafir, shenehergu al Kiddush Hashem, v'lo noda zman petiratam, Hashem yikom damam. They were killed back in Poland, his mother's parents. So if you know anything about Polish Hasidism, these are two very important groups, Ger, Gur, and Radzin. Although they're on opposite sides of the barricades. But let's say in the 1920s, the head of the Aguda in Poland was Avram Mordechai Alter, the Ger Rebbe. He was the Nasi, and the Skan was the Radziner Rebbe, Reb Mordechai Yosef Elazar Leiner. Last name is Leiner. The Ger's last name was Alter. Once upon a time was Rothenburg. But anyway, so these were very important Hasidic groups in Poland. And they both come out of Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. This was a very important part of Reb Matis's intellectual baggage. He referred me to a Sefer Ramatayim Tzofim by Reb Shmuel Shinova. He said, if you study this, you'll have some insight into the Rebbe Rabbinim, Reb Simcha Bunim Pshischa. Today there's a book by Michael Rosen, Quest for Authenticity, which is a biography of Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. But Polish Hasidism, as I said, Gur and and Radzin, they come out of the Rebbe Rabbinim. And that was something very important for Reb Matis, to understand where he's coming from, that he's coming from this school of Polish Hasidism, which is a Lomdische Hasidus. There are schools of Hasidism which are more mystical and less rational, but these were Hasidim who prided themselves on their intellect, and this came out of the Rebbe Rabbinim, and then goes into Kotsk and Ishbitzer, and Kotsk becomes Gur, and Ishbitzer becomes Radzin. Polish Hasidism is an intellectual Hasidism. It's Lomdish. It's for Lamdonim, people who prided themselves on their knowledge of Shas, of Talmud. And his Rebbe, Rebbe Varshava, is coming out of Warsaw. As I said, the Pachad Yitzchak, the Rosh Yeshiva's father's people, the Hudners, Segals, they were Litvakis, but the mother's people were Gerer. So in a sense, this was a perfect match of Rebbe and Talmud, where they're coming from similar backgrounds, similar antecedents. Something else that Rav Matis picked up from Rav Hutner was a love of Rav Kook, and that's where Rav Matis and I hit it off. That was really the bond that connected us, the Kesher Shel Kayama, was Rav Kook. I had studied in Yerushalayim under Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook, who was the son of Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the only son, the Ben Yochid. And the way Matis came to Rav Kook was through his Rebbe, Rav Hutner, who had studied under Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook in Yerushalayim. He was a Slobodka Talmud. He learned in the Hebron Yeshiva. He was close to the Alta von Slobodka, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel. But in his days in Yerushalayim, he drew very close to Rav Kook, and there was also a family connection, because Rav Tzvi Yehuda's wife, Chavaleya, was a cousin of Rav Hutner. So Rav Hutner was not only a Talmud of Rav Kook, but it was also, there was the Korveshaft, a Kesher Mishpachti. And I learned things from Rav Matis. As I said, he put me onto this Sefer Ramatayim Sofim, Shmuel Shinovit, to understand about the Rebbe Rabbinim, although that work is a problematic work. Scholars have problems with that work. But he also was able to sharpen my focus of Rav Kook, because Rav Matis was very medakdek. He was an editor, right? And he had a fine eye for detail and for language, and he pointed out to me that my teacher, Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook, had taken liberties with his father's works in his capacity as an editor. They call it the editorial capacity, and made me aware of that. Where today I look at that very carefully. I'm looking always for whatever changes of language occur in the writings of Rav Kook, changes that were made by his son Rav Tzvi Yehuda, or the Nazir, or Rav Chalab. Now, you might say, well, they're minor. No, they're not minor. Sometimes they are significant. So this is something I learned from Rav Matis. Well, a lot of it is purely editorial, where you shift words around, but sometimes it's defensive, because the Rav, I understand that's how Rav Hutner used to refer to Rav Kook, as the Rav. The Rav was a Nirdaf. Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook was a Nirdaf. There were Kanoim who embittered his life, and his son, to protect, to shield his father, to defend his father, would sometimes tone things down. They would not be expressed in such a provocative manner, that they would be more palatable to a certain community. Now, something that the family should look into, Ramatis told me that in the Igrot, Uktavim, of Rav Hudner, Igrot Uktavim, Pachad Yitzchak, there is a letter to him in there. He would not reveal to me which letter, and he was adamant, though I tried to pry it out of him, but perhaps the family can discover which of the letters in the Igrot, the Pachad Yitzchak, was addressed to Ramatis. Something else that Ramatis and his Rebbe, the Pachad Yitzchak, shared in common, I would say, is intellectual curiosity. On the one hand, they were both very frum and ensconced in the Haredi world, as it's called today, whatever that means. But both of them had a tremendous intellectual curiosity, what's called in Yiddish a breite fanem, where they wanted to take it all in. And it's known that Rav Hudner was reading everything under the sun. In fact, a fellow who was one of his shamoshim or gaboyim over the years told me that one time another Rosh Yeshiva was coming to visit Rav Hudner, and he instructed this young man to clear off his desk, whatever was on the desk. And he said, Gicher, like fast, because the other Rosh Yeshiva is coming. I don't want him to see, all the things that I'm reading. But look, in the Pachad Yitzchak, there are many different influences. And today there have been leaks, I would say. Recently, the Mashgiach, Reb Shlomo Carlebach, left us a memoir. It's been published. It's his notes of his Chavrushaft with his Rebbe, with the Pachad Yitzchak. They were learning together the Beur Hagra L'Sifra Ditzniuta, which is something I published for manuscript based on a manuscript I found in the Library of Congress in Washington. But anyway, this is something that Rav Yitzchak Hudner was teaching to his Talmud Reb Shlomo Carlebach, and after the Mashgiach's Petira, it's been published. So Rav Hudner was very secretive, but now things are starting to come out, the various Ketavim. And I think Ramatis also might have been somewhat secretive. He wouldn't reveal to me which letter, but I think it's appropriate now that the family should reveal things. Well, some years ago, I visited Reb Shlomo Carlebach in Lakewood, and he had all his wits about him. Unfortunately, he was hard of hearing. And he said that, that there used to be a photo of Rav Kook hanging in the sukkah, but what happened was Rav Hudner was told that Rav Yoelish Teitelbaum, the Satmarov, had heard about this, and he was very upset that Rav Hudner has this photo hanging on the wall of the sukkah, and Rav Hudner took it down. Look, Rav Hudner got a tremendous amount out of Rav Kook, and he was really instrumental in helping me set up Orot. which in the first years was more organizational. Eventually it became a publishing house, a small publishing house, to publish works of Rav Kook in English translation for the benefit of the English-speaking public. Rav Matis did let people know how much he loved Rav Kook, and I think he got some pushback for that over the years. But if you're a Polish, you have a certain azus de kedusha, right? That's kind of what typifies these various schools, whether it's Gur or Radzin. They have a chutzpah to them, a holy chutzpah, azus de kedusha, a holy brazenness, and Rabbi Greenblatt was courageous that way. He was very charismatic, Rav Kook. Look, there's something from Rabbi Soloveitchik that's gone viral. Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, where he says that he visited Eretz Yisrael once in 1935, the summer of 35. And he went to a kibbutz, which belonged to Hashomer HaTzair, all the way to the left, Sitra de Smala. And they had a kosher kitchen. The mashgiach, who would be mafresh trumas u'maistres, and Rabbi Soloveitchik was amazed. People, obviously, you're so far to the left. Rabbi Soloveitchik says they were Marxists, Stalinists. Why do you have a kosher kitchen? So they said, well, many years ago, Rav Kook was here. And he made such an impression, such a imprint on us, that after that we kashered the kitchen. He was very charismatic. You could hear that from Rabbi Soloveitchik's own mouth. There's a recording. Rav Chalap writes that, because Rav Chalap, who was a Talmud Mufak of Rav Kook, he would accompany his Rebbe to these various kibbutzim in the north, and he saw how his Rebbe is like a magnet. The people who were so far away, they were drawn to him. They were attracted to him. He was an Ohev Yisrael. He had a great Avas Yisrael, and people could feel it, and people can feel love. They can feel when someone loves them. And that was the secret of success. I, as a boy, growing up in Washington Heights, there was a fellow in our community. I've written about him in various writings of mine. His name was Amihud Nachmani. He was a Levi. And he was the first child born in Rehovot. Today it's a bustling city. It's the home of Mechon Weizmann Institute, but it was a village in those days. And Rav Kook would summer there. The Rabbanus was in Yafo, but on the stationery it said that he was the Rav of Yafo HaMoshavot, the surrounding settlements, and he would spend the summer in Rehovot. And Amihud Nachmani was a boy growing up in Rehovot, and he recounted for me how Rav Kook would come to Rehovot, and the Chalutzim would dance around Rav Kook in a circle, and Rav Kook would stand in the center. But even as a boy, he discerned that Rav Kook is in another world altogether. The Jewish action was Rabbi Greenblatt's baby. He was always on the lookout for new talent. He encouraged young writers, such as myself and many others. He would give an opportunity to young, aspiring writers, give them a voice. Very encouraging to young people. My son, when I told him about Rabbi Greenblatt's passing, he said he was like a grandfather to me. So Ramatis was always encouraging young people. I remember one time I came to his house, and there was a young man there who was a Choser B'Tshuvah. He had come from very far away spiritually, maybe geographically too. And Rabbi Greenblatt introduced me to this young man, and he said, "Do you know who he's descended from?" I said, "No." He said, "He's descended from Reb Leibele Eger." Reb Leibele Eger, who was the Talmud of the Ishbitzer. He was the Rebbe in Lublin. After him was Reb Tzadok HaKohen. But before Reb Tzadok, the Rebbe in Lublin was Reb Leibele Eger. So Rabbi Greenblatt was always encouraging young people, trying to be makarev, people to Judaism. Now, he wasn't always easy to figure out because he was coming from so many different places. Someone who was very important in Rabbi Greenblatt's life was Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein. In fact, as I recall, hanging on the wall was a photo of Ramatis together with Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein. Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, like Ramatis, was a Talmud of Rav Hutner in Chaim Berlin, and later he became the Talmud Mufak of Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. He married Tova Lichtenstein, so sie sei gesund. He became the Rav's Eidim. And his Talmud Mufak. And Rabbi Lichtenstein's way was that of his father, of Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, of synthesis, putting together Torah and Western civilization in some meaningful way. So it was very different from Rav Hutner's way, and sometimes it was difficult for me to follow Ramatis' thinking because there was a fusion there. As I started to say, Rav Hutner knew Chachmas Chitzonius. He was very well versed in the secular philosophy, but it was all kept under wraps. That's the anecdote I told you. That get it off the table quick before the other Rosh Yeshiva comes. Gicher, faster. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, like Rav Yosef of Soloveitchik, his Shver, they were not hiding their secular learning, and verkehrt, they were trying to achieve some kind of meaningful synthesis, I would call it. So I would say there was some of that in Rabbi Greenblatt too. He was a complex personality, and in some ways he was like the other Chaim Berliners. But in some ways he might have viewed them as being verknocht, that they were too narrow-minded, and he, like Rabbi Lichtenstein, who I think was a hero of his, had a broader outlook. So there was a complexity there. There were a lot of anecdotes which I've heard over the years. I knew Rabbi Lichtenstein. I was never his Talmud, but I spoke to him. Some of the anecdotes, one I heard from a teacher of mine who was a classmate of Reb Aaron in Yeshiva University by Rav Soloveitchik. He told me that Reb Aaron went to Harvard. He studied at Harvard. He did a PhD at Harvard on Henry Moore, a Cambridge Neoplatonist, maybe a Cambridge Platonist. So many years ago, I can't remember. And Rav Hutner was very upset. He said, well, what's going to become of him at Harvard? Like, what's, Torah, Matahela. And Rav Soloveitchik said, don't worry, I'll learn with him. I'll learn with him, b'chafrosa, he'll be fine. So I think he considered him probably an intellectual hero. He and I once went to hear Moshe Idel in the city. Moshe Idel is a professor at Hebrew University, professor of Kabbalah. He's considered one of the greatest living authorities on Kabbalah from the academic perspective, not the Hutnerian perspective. And there was a book by Umberto Eco. Don't recall the title of the book, but in the book there's quite a bit about Abulafia. Abraham Abulafia was a Spanish Kabbalist who developed a whole meditative technique. And Umberto Eco was an Italian professor of philosophy, but also a novelist. He was presenting his book, and it was a panel discussion, and one of the panelists was this Professor Moshe Idel. I don't recall whether Matis took me or I took him. There was a synergy between us, but the two of us went there because we wanted to hear Moshe Idel. And afterwards, we went up to him. I introduced Matis to Professor Idel. In Hebrew, I said that this is the literary editor of Jewish Action, and Matis, who was a very humble, modest person, was not happy with the way I introduced him. But I did it anyway, and Idel was interested. So for me, it was shocking. I'm seeing a Kabbalist, Begilui Rosh. It wasn't my idea, it wasn't my mental picture, my preconceived notion of what a Kabbalist looks like. A Kabbalist should have a beard, he should be wearing at least a yarmulke. And here I'm seeing Professor Idel, who is bareheaded. And at that point, Matis broadened my horizon. I was very narrow. I kind of like, what kind of Kabbalist is this? And he set me straight, not to underestimate Idel, that Idel knows his stuff. So that was something that took me by surprise. He had a broad compass, that intellectual curiosity, trying to take it all in. And to me, that's what Polish Hasidism is all about. It goes back to the Rebbe Rabbinim, who was a strange man. He was a Hasidic Rebbe, but he was westernized. He had been an uptyke. He'd been an apothecary, a rokeach. He would go to the fair, the Yechid in Danzig. So he was a very strange Hasidic Rebbe. This fellow who founded this whole school of Posh Hasidism was a Western, in a sense, was a Western man. He was like a Yeke, in a sense. He was Westernized. So Reb Matis, he had deep roots in Polish Hasidism and the Rosh Yeshiva, Pachad Yitzchak, and on the other hand, he, like his friend, like Rabbi Lichtenstein, he wanted to take it all in. He once told me he studied Mahayana Buddhism. He wanted to check out Mahayana Buddhism. It's called intellectual curiosity. Ramatis had a chavrosa here in this town of Monsey, Mendel Morris, who was a study unto himself. Mendel Morris was another Talmud of Rav Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak, who went on to become a Breslover Chassid. And I questioned him about that. What did Rav Hutner say when you became a Breslover? And Mendel Morris said, first I have to explain to you that in my day, Breslovers were Jews who studied Shulchan Aruch. Nachman said, the day you don't study Shulchan Aruch, you're Oisiyid. So I don't know what this thing going on in Uman is today. I don't know what that's all about. So first of all, he wanted to set me straight what Breslov was in his day. And Rav Hutner told him, he said, I know Likutei Halachos better than the Breslover Hasidim. Likutei Halachos is a work by Reb Nosson Sternhartz of Nemirov in Breslov, who was the sofer of Reb Nachman. And after Reb Nachman's Histalkus, Reb Nosson led the Breslover Hasidim. So Rav Hutner told Mendel Morris, he said, in Yiddish, he said, I know the Likutei Halachos better than the Breslover Hasidim. So that gives you some insight into Rav Hutner, how many different worlds he's coming from. There's Rav Kook and Chabad and Breslov and Ishbitz, Radzin, and those who know what to look for, they can find it in the Pachad Yitzchak. But what I wanted to say is that here you have Rabbi Greenblatt, who's a sophisticate, learning B'chavrusa, I would say on a daily basis with Mendel Morris, who is a Breslover, and it's all about Emunah Pshuta, Tmimus. So they were interesting chavrusa. Here it's like Rav Nachman has a story of the time of Chacham. So you have Mendel Morris who has a simple faith. He's not studying philosophy. He's Emunah Pshuta, Tmimus. And he and Ramatis, I think they used to study the Tur Beis Yosef. I think that was the limud. And they were very close, but in a sense they were opposites, as Ramatis pointed out to me, that his chavrus is exact opposite. My wife, when she heard that I'm going to be interviewed, she said, tell them that Ramatis was into physical exercise. He would go jogging. He was physically fit. That was very important to him, which is something that you could find in the writings of Rav Kook. I don't know if it was under Rav Kook's influence, but my wife remembers Ramatis jogging, and she said, tell them how he would jog, physical exercise. He was physically fit. One thing that I'm remembering, he once told me that he is a generation of the Holocaust, and he felt very strongly about that. I don't think he revealed to me that his mother's parents had been killed back in Poland. That I found reading the the Nosach, the epitaph of the Matzeva, but one thing he told me was that I am the generation of the Holocaust, and he felt very strongly about that, and maybe that pushed him to encourage young people to be Makarev Jews to Judaism, that sense of achrayus, of responsibility, that I am the generation of the Holocaust. They moved to Eretz Yisrael. He told me that as a young person, he always sensed that one day his Rebbe Rav Hutner will return to Yerushalayim, which Rav Hutner eventually did. It took many years, but the last years were in Yerushalayim. And the Greenblatts, they made Aliyah. They settled in the Bayit Vagan, and I told them, we had lived in Bayit Vagan for a couple of years. I said, you're going to be close to Polish Hasidism in Bayit Vagan. We lived, Rehov Bayit Vagan 52, we lived right next to Sachachov. And there was also Amshinov. So Bayit Vagan, by and large, at least in those days, was populated by Polish rabbis. There was the Sachachover, the Amshinover. And I told Ramatis, I said, you're going to feel very good there. You're going to get back to your roots. He also, he told me that he attended shiurim at Yeshivat Har Hamor, which today is located somewhere else. But in those days, it was in Bayit Vagan. It was a breakaway from Merkaz Harav. And he told me he got close to those chevra of the Har Hamor in Bayit Vagan. So again, wherever he lived, he was always trying to take it all in. So with Polish Hasidism, with Rav Kook, it was a spicy dish. Let's say you feel a sense of responsibility as a member of the generation of the Holocaust, and you want to rebuild. But how do you go about rebuilding? And I think something that bothered Ramatis was people who were rebuilding the chitzonius, the outer trappings, the levush, but not the panemius, not the inner essence of what it was all about. And I'm going to report a conversation I had many years ago with another friend of Rabbi Greenblatt. His name was Rabbi Nachman Bullman. And I once said to Rabbi Bullman that he was talking about a certain Hungarian Hasidic group, that they preserved the levush. They dressed the way they did back in the old country. And I said they preserved the shalshelas, HaKabbalah, the chain. And Rabbi Bullman cut me off. He said, not the shalshelas, the shell. That's what they're maintaining. Not the shalshelas, not that wonderful chain of tradition. Of the shalshelas, they only have the shell, the outer shell, the chitzonius. And this was very much Rabbi Greenblatt also, that he saw these attempts to rebuild, to recreate the glorious Hasidic tradition, but as he writes, that they're focused on the chitzoniut, on the outer levush, on the garb, the clothing, but they don't have the panemius. And he saw what I was striving for in this work, was to to get at the panemius, at the inwardness, the spirituality. And that's what he writes. Simultaneous with the above-mentioned hedonism and superficiality, one detects a contemporary yearning for greater spirituality. Naor's intriguing and inspiring collection is a symptom of that yearning. So he loved young people that were yearning, for ruchnius, for what in Chabad is called Gettlichkeit, godliness. He loved that. There was a Chedvat Chayim, there was a joie de vivre. In Israel it's called Chedvat Chayim. There was a joyfulness, an exuberance. He was a high-energy person. He was very energetic, and physically, but also mentally, very quick. And he had specific thoughts about the various Hasidic communities, which I won't go into. A lot of people today, they come out of a cookie cutter. He didn't come out of a cookie cutter. The cookie spilled all over. And so I love such people. I appreciate such people. But others who are partisan, whatever, they don't appreciate these eclectic types. And he was very eclectic. It would be hard to pin him down. Coming out of a lot of different Batei Midrash, as his Rebbe, Rav Hudner, once quoted a Midrash that Adam HaRishon was created from all over the place, the soil from all over the planet Earth went into the formation of Adam, and Rav Hudner said, that's the way I am. I'm from all over the place, and Rabbi Greenblatt had that too. He was coming from many different places. He was a dear friend. As I told you, my son said he was like a grandfather to me. So there was a closeness. He showed an ability to bridge many different worlds. We don't have a lot of human bridges. As I said, most of the people that you'll encounter, they fit into a camp, a kreis, a circle, a chug, and we don't have a lot of people that are able to be these human bridges between so many different traditions. And I would hope that the children would learn from that legacy. It's very important.